In fact, our summer has been gorgeous and happily tourist numbers are up. Our next story concerns a group of people who spent their time touring Ireland in beautiful, valuable cars. Over 40 members of the Aston Martin Owners Club of Great Britain spent 2 weeks here driving around the coastline of Ireland, taking in parts of the Wild Atlantic Way and the Causeway coastal routes. Emma McNamara has their story.
Crossing the Irish Sea, 43 people in 22 very special cars. This is how some English Aston Martin owners spent their summer holidays.
It's an Aston Martin DB6 Mark II. It's not quite the same as the James Bond car, which is a DB5, but is the slight development on it. It's quite rare because just over 200 were made, and fewer than that obviously survive today. So it's quite a special car. It has never actually let me down, except twice when the batteries got flat. And for a car to survive 14 years without letting you down is quite a feat. Last year I drove it 7,000 miles around the United States. This year I'm driving it around Ireland.
They drive where we go. I swear my nerves are sore.
What is it about Aston Martins?
They're beautiful, they're well made, they're reliable, and that does make them a bit different. They're sort of classic design. They're the design before people got too concerned about things like wind tunnels and all cars started to look alike. And so as a result, their things are beautiful. They're very attractive cars to look at.
Precious and pricey, the total value of the travelling Astons on tour was about £3 million sterling. This DB4 GT, if it were for sale, would fetch over £1 million. But what's the attraction? Jane Nichols organised the trip for the Aston Martin Owners Club of Great Britain.
I've always loved a nice car, and it was my daughter who suggested, well, why don't you get a classic car? Because they all have join a club, they all have a social side. So my husband gave me a book on classic motor cars and said, okay, thumb through that, see where you get. And I didn't get further than Aston Martins, and I thought, oh, I could live with one of those. Well, the car I ended up with, which I absolutely love, is a DB6. It's 1969. It's in Dubonnet Rosso with a tan interior. Every day you go out in it is an adventure, and it turns heads. We've got a great crowd of people, and they've come in a lovely range of cars. Our eldest is this one here, the DB24, and then we have behind me the DB4 GT, which is a very special car. They're very rare. They are not seen out of private collections or museums very often.
I think people respect Aston Martins. You know, they'll even young boys walking down the street, they'll stop and stare.
Turn and look
and yes, they're not. I think people just love them. You know. There's no other word for it.
The road trip took in Wicklow, Rokeby Hall in Drogheda, Belfast and the West Coast.
We have all the time in the world.
The trip was a huge success, both for the drivers and for Irish tourism. It's thought the group spent over €100,000 on their tour.
And that certainly is one way to see the Irish countryside. I tell you, I wouldn't mind sitting into an Aston Martin to take in the sights.